Imagine stepping into a world defined by, well, deep, profound silence.
Hmm.
You're sitting low in a traditional dugout canoe, it's called a mokoro, and you're just gliding through these clear, unhurried channels. Okavango Delta. There's no
Hmm.
engine sound, no chatter, nothing. Just the gentle whisper of water being displaced by the guide's long wooden pole.
It's incredibly peaceful.
Maybe you hear a fish eagle call way up high, and there's a herd of elephants, huge elephants drinking maybe, what, 10 feet away?
And they barely notice you.
Exactly. They're completely oblivious because you are utterly silent. You just feel this profound wildness, an ancient quiet that seems totally untouched by the modern world.
That image, that pristine, silent isolation,
Hmm.
that's really the ultimate promise of Botswana, isn't it?
It seems like it.
It's often called Africa's crown jewel,
Hmm.
synonymous with epic wildlife, ultimate luxury. But that wildness, that guaranteed exclusivity,
Hmm.
it comes with a major condition, as our sources make really, really clear,
It's,
an eye-watering price tag.
it's exactly. Okay, so our deep dive today is taking a really forensic look at Botswana as a travel destination. We're specifically analyzing this extremely high cost against, well, the quality of the experience you actually get.
Mm.
Is this genuinely a life-changing investment in, one of the last true wild places on Earth? Or is it just overpriced compared to other safari spots that are maybe easier to get to?
That's the core question. We're going to unpack this complex and, frankly, unique, high-cost, low-impact tourism model.
Right.
We'll look at the dizzying logistics required just to get you to your final destination. We'll break down the accommodation tiers that explains the huge price swings. And crucially, we'll distill the must-do activities that help determine if this whole investment is it actually worth it for you, the serious traveler.
Okay, let's unpack that journey then. Starting right at the beginning, the initial investment and the logistical hurdles. Because honestly, just arriving in Botswana sounds like an adventure in itself, a commitment,
Ah,
and definitely an expense.
well, yeah.
This is not a vacation where you just breeze through customs after one direct flight.
It absolutely is a logistical challenge, and that's kind of by design. This isn't a place built for mass tourism, and the infrastructure, or lack thereof, reflects that.
So where do you even start?
Well, the main gateway for pretty much anyone serious about a safari is Maun Airport. That's M-A-U-N.
Okay.
It's essentially the dusty, functional hub for the Okavango Delta. If you're flying in internationally, you are almost certainly looking at a multi-leg journey, often involving connections that can burn hours, sometimes even days, of your travel time.
And that multi-leg journey usually means flying into a major transit hub first, right? Like
Well,
Johannesburg.
That's the most common route, yeah.
Yeah.
Johannesburg in South Africa. Then you catch that final commercial connecting flight up to Maun.
Okay. And when we look at the specific flight costs in the source material, the sticker shock starts pretty much immediately, like before you've even seen your first Impala.
The range is, well, it's stunning. It totally depends on where you're starting from. If you're flying round trip from somewhere relatively close, say Europe, you're already looking at maybe 1,200 to 2,000 US dollars, which is high, but maybe manageable for some.
But for listeners further away,
The commitment really jumps. If you're coming from North America, you should probably budget $1,500 to $2,500 just for the return flight.
wow. And from Asia or Australia, those really long-haul markets.
You need to brace yourself. Costs can easily top $2,500 just to land in Maun. It's a serious upfront cost.
And critically, like you said, that's just landing in the country. That airfare gets you to the gateway town. It doesn't get you out into the actual wilderness camps.
Exactly. Once you're in Botswana, the whole logistical game shifts again. You move from standard commercial flying to this kind of bespoke safari transport system.
Right. This is where we get into the Safari air taxi service. And this is where the package price really jumps again, I gather.
Correct. The key thing to understand here is that most of these remote luxury camps, especially deep in the Delta or in the private conservancies, they're basically only accessible by air.
No roads.
No paved roads, sometimes not even reliable dirt tracks connecting them. So internal travel is all handled by these tiny, unpressurized bush planes, little 6 to 12-seater Cessnas usually.
Okay.
And they're constantly hopping between these dusty private airstrips, literally in the middle of nowhere.
That sounds kind of exhilarating, actually, a real old-school adventure feel. But I imagine that constant personalized airlift is a huge driver of the overall package price.
It absolutely is. It's the logistical spine of the whole fly-in safari trip, and it is expensive. These flights are almost always bundled into your safari package. They represent a core cost of operating in such remote areas.
Why so expensive, though? Just because the planes are small?
Well, think about the operational costs. You need specialized maintenance for planes landing daily on rough dirt strips. Fuel costs are high because getting fuel out there is difficult.
Okay.
You need highly experienced pilots who know this terrain, intimately. It all adds up and rolls into your total bill.
Okay, that makes sense. And tied directly to this air taxi service is that travel constraint that always seems to catch people out, the super strict luggage limits.
Ah, yes. This is non-negotiable, and it's critical for safety and logistics. You are typically limited to a hard maximum of 15 to 20 kilograms per person.
That's not much for a week or two.
It really isn't. And, maybe even more importantly, your bags must be soft-sided. Duffel bags, basically.
Yeah.
Hardshell suitcases are a total no-go. They just won't accept them.
Why are they so rigid about that? I mean, is it really that big a deal if I bring my standard carry-on roller bag?
It is a huge deal, actually. It comes down to basic physics and engineering. Those small bush planes, they don't have big standardized cargo holds like a 737. Luggage is often loaded through a small door, and it needs to be manually sort of squeezed and shaped into these odd compartments, like in the belly pod or even the nose cone of the plane.
Ah.
A rigid bag simply won't compress or conform. It makes efficient and, more importantly, safe loading impossible because weight distribution is critical on these small aircraft.
So you really have to plan meticulously. Pack light. Rely on those soft duffel bags.
You absolutely do. It forces a certain discipline before you even leave home.
Okay, so we've established the fly-in safari, complex, expensive, luggage limitations. But our source material did mention an alternative. The self-drive option. If a listener wants to try and lower that massive logistical expense, what's the trade-off there?
Right, the self-drive route. It's definitely more budget-friendly on the surface, but it demands a very specific kind of traveler. You need to be experienced, confident behind the wheel in tough conditions, and prepared for what is essentially a serious expedition.
So you're trading money for complexity
Right.
and risk.
Exactly. Significant complexity, time investment, and yeah, a fair bit of risk. You rent a fully kitted out 4x4, usually one with a rooftop tent, and then you handle everything yourself: navigation, driving, cooking, camping, potential repairs.
What's the rough cost comparison there? The fly-in is thousands per person per night, potentially. What about the vehicle?
Well, the vehicle rental for a fully equipped bush-ready 4x4, that might run you somewhere between $150 to $250 a day.
Okay, that's a huge difference compared to the fly-in package costs.
It is, in terms of daily rate. You save a lot by avoiding the air taxis and the luxury camp prices. But the trade-off is immense. You have to be completely self-sufficient.
What does that mean in practice?
It means carrying all your own food for days, maybe weeks, enough filtered water, which is heavy, and crucially, enough fuel. You'll be navigating deep, sandy tracks, maybe seasonal water crossings in areas where you might not see another person or any kind of service station for days.
So serious planning required.
Significant self-reliance and planning, yes. It's not for the faint of heart or the inexperienced off-road driver.
But just playing devil's advocate here, when we look at those really high prices for the fly-in packages, are we sure the source isn't maybe overly romanticizing the difficulty of self-drive, just to justify the luxury model's price tag? How hard can a dirt track really be?
That's a fair question. You should always approach these things critically. However, in Botswana, especially in places like Moremi or Savuti, the difficulty is, well, it's pretty authentic.
Okay.
It's off not just a dirt track. It can be incredibly deep, fine, flowery sand that requires specific low-range driving techniques to avoid getting bogged down. Or, during the wet season, tracks can turn into surprisingly deep water crossings, small rivers even.
And if you get stuck,
Oh.
breakdown.
If you break down, you are genuinely, properly alone. There's often no cell service. Help could be days away unless you have a satellite phone and know who to call. What the luxury camps are selling, in part, is peace of mind. Access to their mechanics, their radio networks, immediate logistical support. That's a very real, non-romanticized necessity out there.
Okay, point taken. That gives us the context for the sheer effort and cost just involved in arriving and getting around. Let's shift now to the fundamental economic engine of the destination itself, this high-cost, low-impact model. This philosophy seems to dictate everything about the pricing once you're actually on the ground.
This is where it gets really interesting, I think, and it fundamentally defines the whole Botswana experience. The country operates on a deliberate philosophy of scarcity.
Scarcity, how so?
While their government strategy isn't about maximizing the number of visitors, like many tourist destinations, it's about maximizing the revenue they get from a relatively small number of visitors.
Oh,
So they severely limit the number of lodges allowed to be built, and they limit the number of beds, the number of vehicles allowed to operate within these vast wilderness areas, especially in the prime spots like the Delta.
so the scarcity is kind of manufactured,
Hmm?
engineered, and that directly dictates the price you're paying for the privilege of not seeing crowds.
Precisely. They prioritize conservation and exclusivity over mass tourism. Fewer beds mean each bed has to generate much higher revenue. The goal is maximum income with minimum ecological footprint.
Which, when you put it like that,
If you connect it to the bigger picture, the actual quality of the experience you get, that lack of crowds, the feeling of authentic wildness, often being the only Jeep at a lion sighting, that quality is directly bought by this high barrier to entry. You are essentially paying for emptiness, for solitude.
that actually makes the money feel a bit better spent, knowing it's tied into a specific conservation methodology, not just random high prices.
It does. There's a logic to it, even if it puts it out of reach for many.
Okay, so let's break down those accommodation tiers then, because the price range is just huge. It goes from, what, tens of dollars a night up to thousands?
It's a vast spectrum.
Yeah.
Right at the very bottom, catering mainly to those resilient self-drivers we talked about, you have the public campsites.
Okay.
These are pretty basic. You're looking at around $40 to $60 per person per night, typically. But the source material is very clear.
Yeah.
This is truly wild camping.
What does that mean? No fences.
Often, yes, unfenced. You might get a shared ablution block with a bucket shower, maybe a basic flush toilet if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But you absolutely must be prepared for the reality that the wilderness doesn't stop at your tent flap.
Meaning lions wandering through camp at night, stuff like that.
Exactly that. Hyenas, elephants, potentially lions. It happens. It demands constant situational awareness and respect for where you are. It's a level of authentic wildness most travelers simply never experience.
Right. Okay, moving up from that. The mid-range. This seems to be where most standard, organized safari goers land.
Yes, the mid-range tented camps. And this is where the price point really starts to climb. You're typically looking at anywhere from $500 to $800 per person per night.
Wow. Okay, but what's crucial for the listener to understand here, I think, is that this seemingly high price is usually all-inclusive.
That's absolutely vital for getting your head around the value proposition.
Yeah.
That rate, that $500, $800, it typically covers your accommodation, which is usually a comfortable, permanent tended structure with proper beds and an en-suite bathroom.
Oh, okay.
But it also includes all your meals, which are often surprisingly gourmet. It includes local drinks, often including house wine, beer, and spirits. Park entry fees are usually covered, and importantly, 2 guided safari activities per day.
Like game drives.
Game drives, boat trips if you're in a water area, maybe guided walks. So once you're actually in the camp, you spend almost nothing extra. It's a package deal.
Okay, that changes the calculation a bit. But
Right.
then we hit the pinnacle. The
Yeah.
places that make the headlines, the global standard for luxury safari, names like Momo Camp, Zarafa, the real luxury tier. Here we're talking, what, $1,500 to well over $3,000 per person per night.
Correct. That's the top end.
When you're paying that much, what specific extra luxury are you getting that justifies, say, 5 times the cost of the already pretty excellent sounding mid-range? Is it just fancier tents?
It's more than just fancier tents, though the tents are definitely fancier. That difference is quantifiable, and it's largely operational and locational.
Okay.
Firstly, service levels skyrocket. The staff-to-guest ratio might be 3.1, even 4.1. You often get a personal butler, private plunge pools, completely tailored dining experiences and activity schedules. It's hyper-personalized.
Right.
Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, you are very likely in a private concession.
What does that mean exactly?
It means the lodge operator has leased a huge tract of exclusive land from the government or local community. Your $3,000 a night is directly funding the anti-poaching unit that patrol that land, supporting significant local community employment initiatives tied to the lease, and crucially, guaranteeing that only vehicles from that specific, very small camp can traverse that land.
Ah, so the extra money buys guaranteed exclusivity. You literally won't see another tourist vehicle on your game drive.
That's a huge part of it. And you also usually get the absolute top guides, the rock stars of the guiding world. These guides often have the freedom to drive off-road within the concession rules to track specific, rare sightings, which you generally can't do in the national parks.
So better access, better guiding.
They're often experts with decades of experience. They can anticipate animal behavior, offer incredibly deep insights. It transforms a sighting from just a photo op into a profound educational moment. You're really paying for guaranteed quality control over the entire wilderness experience, the guiding, the location, the exclusivity, the service.
Okay, that clarifies the structure. Now we
Mm.
know the cost structure. Let's look at the location structure.
Okay.
Because unlike visiting a city where you pick a neighborhood, here you're choosing your ecosystem, right? The source material highlights three main regions offering really different experiences.
Exactly. Choosing the ecosystem is like choosing the whole flavor of your trip. First up, you have the icon, the Okavango Delta.
The classic water world.
Right, a vast inland river system that fans out into this incredible maze of islands, lagoons, and channels. It's serene, it feels incredibly remote, and it's probably the best area for first-timers who want that quintessential silent, sensory Mokoro experience we talked about.
Yeah.
It really is the heart of that pristine wilderness narrative.
Okay. Then we shift gears to the Chobe National Park riverfront. This area, usually accessed via the town of Kasane, sounds like it's defined more by sheer volume, sheer numbers of animals.
Tobe is synonymous with abundance,
Mhm.
particularly elephants. It hosts possibly the largest concentration of elephants anywhere in Africa, especially during the dry season.
Wow.
The source describes it as the place you go to see massive numbers, hundreds, sometimes thousands of animals congregating along the Chobe River, the permanent water source.
So less exclusive maybe, but more spectacle.
Exactly. It is more accessible, closer to towns like Kasane and Victoria Falls.
Mm.
Consequently, by Botswana's high standards, it can feel slightly less exclusive than the Deep Delta private concessions. You'll see more boats, more vehicles. But the sheer wildlife spectacle is just mind-blowing.
Okay. And finally, for the traveler who maybe has seen the Big Five multiple times and is seeking something completely different, there are the Magadege pans.
This is the third and probably the most unique option, the Magadigati. It's this vast, almost completely flat, ancient lake bed system, now enormous salt pans.
Sounds otherworldly.
It really is. Stark, silent, incredibly atmospheric. It's not primarily focused on the Big Five in the traditional safari sense.
Yeah.
The experience here is driven more by the incredible sense of solitude, the vastness of the landscape.
What do you do there?
Activities are unique too, like quad biking across the enormous empty pan. There's nothing quite like it. And there are unique interactions with specialized desert wildlife. It definitely caters more to a seasoned traveler who values landscape, silence, and unique experiences, perhaps as much as ticking off megafauna.
That sense of stark solitude is actually a perfect transition to talking about the culture and the flavor of Botswana, particularly the food. Because while most safari goers are eating, high-quality international cuisine in the lodges, that doesn't tell the whole story of the country's culinary identity, does it?
Not at all. The dining inside the camps, while often spectacular, featuring, French techniques, African influences, fusion dishes, it's really an extension of that luxury service bubble.
And a logistical feat, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. It's a marvel, really.
Hmm.
Considering that fresh produce, fine meats, imported cheeses, those curated wine lists, they often have to be flown in daily or weekly to these remote locations. That adds significantly to the camp overhead, of course, but it guarantees that world-class culinary experience that's included in your nightly rate.
But if you do venture outside that camp bubble, say if you have a day in Mon or maybe even Gaborone, what's the essential taste of the nation? What should you look for?
You absolutely must seek out Seswa, Seswaa. It's the national dish, and it represents simple, savory comfort food at its absolute best.
What is it exactly?
It's beef, or sometimes goat, that's been slow-cooked for hours, often just with salt and maybe a little onion, until it's completely falling apart tender. Then the crucial step, it's pounded, literally pounded, until it becomes this incredibly soft, shredded texture. The flavor is rich and meaty, but the texture is unique.
Sounds delicious. And what do you eat it with?
It's almost always served with pap, P-A-P. That's the staple across much of southern Africa, a stiff porridge made from maize meal. It forms the base of the meal, kind of bland on its own, but perfect for soaking up the seswa. And usually alongside that, you'll get morago.
Morago.
Yeah, M-O-R-O-G-O. It's essentially wild spinach or other local greens, simply cooked. So seswa, pap, morago, that's the classic Botswana plate. It's the hearty, caloric foundation of the local diet, and completely distinct from the delicate fusion food you might get at a luxury lodge.
Okay, got it. And for something quick, savory, maybe on the street, the source material mentioned a really staggering pricing contrast here.
Ah, you mean the Vetkoek, V-E-T-K-O-E-K. Yeah, that's the local street food equivalent. It's basically a ball of dough, deep fried until golden brown. like a savory donut almost.
Okay.
And it's often stuffed, either before frying or after, with savory fillings like curried mince, sometimes chicken, or even just plain. They're cheap, filling, and delicious when hot.
And the price contrast.
The source noted you can often grab one of these piping hot from a street vendor for maybe the equivalent of $1, maybe even less.
$1. That contrast is just astonishing. You have a satisfying local meal of seswa and pap costing maybe $5 to $10 versus the hundreds of dollars per person covering an included gourmet multi-course meal back at the lodge.
It really highlights the two different worlds operating side by side, the high-end international tourism bubble and the local economy and way of life. It shows that if you stick purely to the fly-in safari circuit, your food budget is fixed and high-end, but you might miss the authentic local flavor unless you make a specific effort.
So you need to deliberately step away from the safari bubble, maybe during that necessary layover in Mon, or if you arrange a specific cultural excursion.
Exactly. Seek it out.
And if you do manage to connect culturally, the source highlights the social heart of Botswana, the braai, the barbecue.
The braai, pronounced braai, is absolutely central. It's the main social ritual, like in much of southern Africa. It's where friends and family gather, cook meat over open coals, share stories, drink beer. It's the best, most authentic way to interact with Botswana people.
And the people themselves.
The source material consistently describes Botswana as wonderfully warm, proud, dignified, and very welcoming to visitors. And a huge advantage for travelers is that English is widely spoken, it's an official language, which makes communication much easier than in some other parts of Africa.
That's good to know. Any quick cultural etiquette tips, especially around food?
Well, if you are invited to share a traditional meal, perhaps sitting on the floor or around a communal pot, the polite way to eat is often traditionally with your right hand.
How does that work with pap and seswa?
You break off a small piece of the stiff pap, roll it into a ball between your fingers, make a little indentation with your thumb, and then use that almost like an edible scoop to pick up the seswa or the morogo.
Ah, clever.
It takes a little practice, but it shows respect and willingness to engage. It's a key way to connect with local hospitality. Oh, and while you're connecting, definitely try the local beer. St. Louis Lager is the main one. Widely available, crisp, refreshing, perfect for washing down some braai meat.
Okay, St. Louis Lager. Noted. Right, we've covered the price, the logistical nightmare or adventure, the different regions, the cultural flavor. Now we finally arrive at the core justification for all that expense, the activities. This is the definitely worth it list, the things that supposedly make Botswana utterly unique and justify that massive investment. What's number one?
The source material is absolutely unequivocally clear on this. The number one non-negotiable, must-do, essential activity is a Mokoro trip in the Okavango Delta.
Right, back to that opening image.
Exactly. This is the quintessential Botswana experience because it's about total sensory immersion. It's unlike any other way of viewing wildlife.
Let's dive back into that sensory detail again. You emphasized it's not just a boat ride. It's defined by the silence and the proximity you get.
It's about the shift in perspective. You're sitting low, right down at water level. You're gliding through these narrow channels lined with papyrus reeds and water lilies. And your engine is an expert local guide, often someone who grew up poling these same waters, standing at the back, silently propelling the Mokoro with a long wooden pole called ungashi.
So the only sound is?
The only sound is the gentle swish of the pole entering and leaving the water. Maybe the rustle of reeds, the call of a bird, the buzzing of insects, the natural sounds of the delta. This profound silence is what allows you to approach wildlife incredibly closely. Not just the big stuff, but tiny painted reed frogs clinging to stems, dazzling dragonflies, beautiful malachite kingfishers, things you'd completely miss in a noisy motorboat.
And the big game, too.
Oh, yes. You can glide silently past elephants drinking, buffalo grazing on the banks, maybe even shy antelope like Sitatunga standing in the water. They often don't register you as a threat because there's no engine noise, no unnatural shape. It's pure, profound magic. It really resets your whole relationship with the natural world.
Logistically, you said it's usually included in those high-cost Delta Lodge packages.
Yes. Typically, 1 or 2 Mokoro excursions are standard if you stay at a water-based camp in the Delta.
But what if you were, say, self-driving or staying in Mon? Can you do it as a day trip?
You can.
Okay.
You can arrange Mokoro day trips or even overnight camping trips from Mon, organized through community trusts or local operators. The cost, according to the sources, is relatively contained for what you get, maybe around $100 to $150 per person for a full day trip.
That seems like amazing value, actually, especially compared to the overall cost of getting to Botswana in the first place.
It probably provides the highest emotional return on investment of any activity there. You're paying for an intimate, personal, human-powered connection to the wilderness that is just unforgettable.
Okay, Mokoro chip check. Essential. Moving to the second must-do, we head over to Chobe, the place of abundance. The river cruise on the Chobe River.
Right. If the Mokro is about silence and intimacy, the Chobe River Cruise is about scale and spectacle.
This is where you witness that sheer density of wildlife that Botswana is so famous for.
That's the defining factor. Chobe, especially the riverfront near Kasan, is the place where you really get your head around just how rich and abundant the African ecosystem can be, particularly with elephants.
Thousands, you said.
You are pretty much guaranteed, especially in the dry season, May to October, to witness hundreds, sometimes literally thousands, of elephants coming down to the river in the late afternoon to drink, bathe, socialize. It's just overwhelming. Processions of elephants walking down ancient paths to the water.
Incredible. What else?
Yeah. You'll see massive Nile crocodiles basking on the banks, some of the biggest you'll ever see. Huge pods of hippos grunting and jostling for space in the water. Abundant bird life, fish eagles, kingfishers, storks, weavers, plus buffalo, giraffe, zebra, various antelope coming to drink. The sheer concentration of life along that riverbank is incredible. It genuinely feels like watching a real-life National Geographic documentary unfold right in front of you.
And here again, the value proposition seems to shift remarkably. The source says this river cruise is relatively inexpensive compared to the luxury lodging.
Yeah, it's quite accessible. A typical 3-hour afternoon boat safari on the Chobe River usually runs only about $40 to $60 per person, plus the park entry fees.
So while the country itself is expensive, you can access one of its absolute best, most spectacular wildlife experiences relatively affordably. That's interesting.
It is. It makes Chobe a popular add-on, even for people doing safaris elsewhere. One useful tip from the sources, though, try to opt for smaller boats if possible.
Why is that?
The smaller boats, maybe seating 8 to 12 people, offer a much more intimate experience. They're quieter, they sit lower in the water, giving you a better photographic angle, and they can often maneuver closer to the banks and into smaller channels than the larger double-decker cruise boats that can sometimes feel a bit crowded, especially during peak season.
Good tip. Smaller boat on the Chobe. Okay, finally, for our third core worth-it experience, we return to the stark, strange beauty of the Magadikari Pans. You mentioned spending a night out under the stars and that unique experience with the habituated meerkats.
Right. This one's quite different. It's less about ticking off the big five and more about solitude, landscape, and a perhaps more spiritual connection.
Sleeping out on the salt pans.
Yes. Several lodges operating near the pans offer the experience of sleeping out, often just on bedrolls, with warm bedding right out on the vast, empty salt pan under the immense African sky. The silence is described as absolute, profound, so total it almost rings in your ears. For many, it's the most humbling, perspective-shifting experience of their trip. Just you, the stars, and infinite space.
Wow. That sounds intense.
It forces a kind of introspection that very few places on Earth allow anymore.
And the meerkats, they're the delightful, almost comical counterpoint to that vastness. Explain why they are habituated. Why isn't this just like feeding animals or a zoo experience?
This is really vital to understand, both ethically and experientially. These meerkats are not pets. They are not fed by humans. They are completely wild family groups living naturally out on the pans.
So why do they let people get close?
They have become accustomed to human presence, habituated specifically through long-term, non-invasive research projects that have been conducted in the area for many, many years. Researchers needed to observe their natural behavior up close. The protocols are strict. The interaction is entirely passive. You sit quietly, you don't approach them, you don't feed them, you don't touch them, unless they initiate contact in a very specific way.
So the interaction is driven entirely by the meerkat's natural behavior, not by human intervention or luring them in.
Exactly. Because they've learned over generations that the quiet, seated humans involved in the research pose no threat, they simply go about their daily routine, digging for scorpions, chirping warnings, grooming each other, often just feet away from the observers.
And this is where the famous detail comes in.
Yes. Because the pans are so incredibly flat, there are no natural high points like termite mounds or bushes for the meerkat on sentry duty to get a good view.
Right.
So a meerkat, seeking the highest available point to scan for predators like martial eagles, might genuinely decide that your head or your shoulder is the best lookout post available.
Seriously, they'll just climb on you.
It happens quite often. You become temporarily part of the landscape furniture. It's an utterly unforgettable, completely natural interaction that, as far as I know, simply doesn't exist in this way anywhere else in the world.
That is definitely an unforgettable image. But I assume that level of unique access, both for the sleep out and the meerkats, typically only comes packaged with stays at the specific higher cost lodges located near those research sites.
That's generally true, yes. Which, again, it kind of reinforces that core value proposition of Botswana. You're often paying a premium for truly unique access points and experiences that are simply not available to the average traveler or in more crowded destinations.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's pivot now as we head towards wrapping up to the realities, the overall vibe, and the caveats. Beyond the glossy postcard images and the specific activities, what does Botswana actually feel like? What's the intangible vibe you get there?
I think the overarching feeling, consistently mentioned in the sources, is one of vastness and truly authentic wilderness.
Authentic meaning.
Meaning it's not manicured. It's not a theme park with guaranteed sightings on a schedule. The animals are genuinely wild, their movements dictated by seasons and resources, not by feeding stations. The landscapes feel untamed, ancient. You feel genuinely remote, often quite small and insignificant in the face of it all.
That sounds humbling.
It is. It's a very humbling experience, and it demands absolute respect for the environment, the wildlife, and the guidance of your guides.
Okay. In terms of the non-wildlife positives, the source material highlights several things that maybe make that big financial investment feel a bit more justified beyond just the animals.
Yes, the cultural and political context is quite positive and important. As we mentioned, the Botswana people are consistently described as genuinely warm, proud, welcoming. English is widely spoken, making interactions easy. And crucially for travelers, the country boasts remarkable political stability and is considered very safe for tourists from a crime perspective. That peace of mind is not always a guarantee in the region, so it's a significant plus.
And circling back to that core economic model, the high cost, low impact thing, how confident can you be that your tourist dollars are actually protecting the ecosystem and not just, lining the pockets of international luxury hotel chains?
That's a really important and probing question, and something travelers should ask. The source material emphasizes that there seems to be a palpable national pride in Botswana regarding their conservation model. The government's intentional strategy, high revenue from low volume, means that the concessions granted to lodge operators often include very specific, stringent clauses requiring significant investment back into anti-poaching patrols, habitat management, and, very importantly, local community employment and development projects.
So there's a tangible link.
It feels like there is. As a tourist paying those high fees, there's a sense backed up by seeing well-equipped anti-poaching units or meeting highly trained local guides from nearby villages that your expensive contribution is directly helping to protect these incredible ecosystems and providing high-quality, sustainable jobs. And the proof is in the pudding, really. The lack of crowds, often being the only vehicle at a major sighting, is the physical evidence that the model is working to preserve the wilderness in a relatively pristine state.
That must make those expensive sightings feel incredibly exclusive and, yeah, worthwhile, knowing you're not part of a crowd damaging the experience.
Exactly. It connects the price directly to the quality of the experience and the conservation outcome.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the caveats, the things you should actively avoid, maybe. Or the skips, which our source material frames mostly as avoiding costly mistakes. What's mistake number one?
The number one mistake highlighted across the board is trying to do Botswana on a shoestring budget.
Why is that a mistake? Isn't saving money good?
Usually, yes. But because Botswana is so fundamentally designed as a high-cost, low-volume destination, trying to cut too many corners often drastically degrades the quality of the experience you get, to the point where the initial expensive flight and significant travel time are maybe no longer worth the investment.
So you might end up paying all those high logistical costs to get there, but then receive subpar returns, like less experienced guides, maybe older or less reliable vehicles if you rent cheap, or being restricted to camping in public areas that are perhaps less rich in wildlife or more crowded.
Precisely. You diminish the potential return on your already significant investment in flights and time. The source material strongly suggests that if your budget is genuinely restrictive, you will likely find much better overall value, fantastic wildlife viewing for your money elsewhere. maybe self-driving in Namibia or doing a well-planned Kruger Park trip in South Africa.
So the quality of the Botswana experience specifically is intrinsically linked to paying for that higher standard.
That seems to be the consensus, yes. Trying to force it into a budget model doesn't really work well there.
Okay. Mistake number two is apparently wasting precious time in the cities. Places like Gaborone, the capital, and Mon.
Right. They are functional hubs, not really tourist destinations in their own right. Gaborone is primarily administrative. Mon, as we said, is the essential logistical gateway to the Delta. It has a certain dusty, interesting frontier town vibe, and you'll absolutely need it for supplies, maybe banking or vehicle rentals if you're self-driving.
But don't plan your vacation around them?
Exactly. The real Botswana, the Botswana you came all that way and paid all that money to see, is out in the bush. Deep in the Delta, on the Chobe River, out on the Pans. Don't waste precious, expensive days exploring the cities when you should be out on safari. Use them efficiently. Fly in, get your supplies or connections sorted, and move out into the wild as quickly as possible.
Makes sense. And finally, we just need to reiterate that constant awareness factor. While we noted Botswana is safe from a crime perspective, the wilderness itself demands continuous, serious respect.
The wildness is the potential danger. This is serious, authentic wilderness, remember, not a zoo. Guides must be listened to, their instructions obeyed without question.
Especially things like,
Especially rules like don't leave your tent unaccompanied after dark. They mean it literally. Many camps, even luxury ones, are unfenced to allow natural animal movement. Large predators, lions, hyenas, leopards absolutely do move freely through the camps at night. You have to treat the environment with genuine humility and awareness.
okay, last reality check. What about connectivity? For the modern traveler, being completely offline can be a major hurdle, or maybe a major bonus.
Yeah, this is a big one. The reality check is pretty simple. Wi-Fi is spotty to completely non-existent in most of the deep wilderness camps.
Even the expensive ones?
Even the expensive ones. Satellite internet might exist in the main lodge area, but it's often slow, unreliable, and expensive for the camps to operate, so they might limit access or charge extra. You should generally plan to be offline or have very limited connectivity for large parts of your trip.
Which could be good or bad.
Exactly. For some travelers, that enforced digital detox is a huge positive. It allows them to fully disconnect and immerse themselves in the quiet and the experience. For others, maybe those who need to stay connected for work or family reasons, it's a critical, practical challenge they need to factor into their decision-making process before booking.
Okay, right. We've covered the complex logistics, the eye-watering price tags, the different regions, the cultural flavors, the incredible rewards, and the important realities. Let's try and bring this all together now for our final synthesis and the verdict.
Sounds good. I think the conclusion from all the source material is pretty clear. Botswana offers an expensive, yes, logistically complex, yes, but ultimately an unparalleled, exclusive, and genuinely wild safari experience. It is definitely not cheap, but it seems to be a real investment in guaranteed exclusivity and quality, tied directly to a functioning conservation model.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Who should absolutely make the significant investment, and who should maybe look at those alternatives like Namibia or Kruger? Let's break down the final verdict.
Okay, Botswana is absolutely worth the investment if you are a serious wildlife enthusiast or perhaps a keen photographer who specifically values pristine, uncrowded habitats above almost everything else. You want that feeling of being alone with the wildlife. It's also worth it if you're celebrating a major life milestone, maybe a big anniversary, definitely a honeymoon, and you require and can afford a truly top-tier, five-star luxury experience that will be unforgettable and highly personalized. Botswana delivers that at the highest level.
And it's also, flipping to the other end of the spectrum, the perfect place for that adventurous, experienced, self-sufficient overlander. Someone looking for a multi-week challenge, relying on their own skills and vehicle to conduct a proper expedition into genuine, remote, untouched wilderness via the self-drive and camping route.
Exactly. Now, conversely, Botswana is probably not worth the significant expense for a few key types of travelers.
Such as?
Well, obviously, if you are a budget backpacker trying to make your money stretch as far as possible, Botswana is just not the place. Your funds will go much, much further and buy you more time and experiences in places like Namibia, Zimbabwe, or parts of South Africa.
Okay. Who else should maybe reconsider?
It's also likely not the ideal choice if you're looking for a fast-paced, multi-activity kind of vacation where you're constantly doing different things. The rhythm of a Botswana safari is generally slow, contemplative, patient. It's centered almost entirely around observing wildlife and soaking in the environment.
And families.
Families with very young children need to be cautious. Due to the nature of the remote, often unfenced camps, and the serious safety requirement, you simply can't let small children wander around. Many lodges have strict minimum age restrictions, often 12 years or even older, so it's not typically suitable for families with toddlers or young kids. And finally, linking back to the connectivity point, if you absolutely require constant Wi-Fi access, or if you're looking for nightlife, shopping lots of different restaurants, or a highly structured, predictable itinerary, Botswana is really the antithesis of that kind of vacation.
Yeah.
The value proposition here is far more intangible. It's about that profound wildness, the silence, the exclusivity, and the lasting memories of true solitude in nature.
Okay. The source material repeatedly frames Botswana as an expedition to one of the last wild places on Earth. That sense of exclusivity, that investment required to access it, it dictates the price, as we've discussed. And it forces, I think, a broader philosophical question for us to end on. Since this high-cost, low-impact model seems to be the very thing designed to sustain and protect this pristine wilderness, what does this imply about the future of conservation globally?
That's a really interesting and slightly uncomfortable question, isn't it? Can we, as a planet, effectively protect truly wild, large-scale functioning ecosystems like the Okavango Delta without putting such a high financial barrier to entry on them?
Does conservation at the highest level for the wildest places inherently require this kind of exclusivity to succeed economically and ecologically?
Or is there potentially another path, another model for preserving planetary wildness that doesn't rely quite so heavily on essentially the financial investment of the relatively small number of elite travelers who can afford these prices?
It's definitely something to think about. What is the true cost of preserving wilderness, and who should pay it?
A big question.
Certainly something for you, the listener, to mull over as you weigh the worth of this particularly magnificent and undoubtedly very expensive expedition.